WCEG Network. Follow us on WCEG Talk Radio, or watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube, TWR, LinkedIn, the WCEG Network. I'm William Bill Edwards, and I'm your host for Wisdom Wednesdays for the next hour. I am so pleased today to have two dynamic guests with me. And this is Women's Month, and I'm glad I chose these two. And with me today, representing education, women in education, are Fulton County School Board, Kimberly Dove, she's the president in District 6, and Franchesca Warren, board member, District 4. Thank you, ladies, for being with me.
Thank you for having us.
District 4. Thank you, ladies, for being with me. Okay, well, let's start off by doing this. Let's make the audience familiarize the audience with who is Kimberly Dove and who is Franchesca Warren.
Awesome. So wonderful Wednesday, everyone. I love the wisdom concept. I am Kimberly Dove, the president of Fulton County School Board. I have 3 adult children. One of my children graduated from high school in Fulton County Schools, as well as I was elected to the board. I started serving in 2017. I was appointed, and then I recently was reelected to the board in May 2022. So you have the opportunity to serve with me another 4 years.
And that is great. We look forward to those 4 years. Franchesca, who is Franchesca?
So I am a mom, a daughter, a wife. I have 4 children, all 4 either currently attend Fulton County Schools or have graduated from Fulton County Schools. Former educator, worked all kind of realms of education. And I'm just happy to be here, happy to talk education on this Wisdom Wednesday.
Well, good. Kim, you got 3 adult children. You don't look like you're in school yourself. And Franchesca, you multitask. I mean, it's amazing how you simply multitask and then get out in the mornings and walk and have a show while you're walking. So I'm glad to know these two. Listen, let's talk about something. Let's do it this way. I want to talk about the schools. Let's start with the elementary schools first. All right. I want to break it up. And basically, I want to talk about things that people don't know about or people don't get a chance to know about. So let's talk about your elementary schools and what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve in terms of student achievement.
You want me to start, Ms. Dove, or you want to start? Okay. So one of the things, I'm a parent of, all my kids have been in elementary school in Fulton County Schools. And in the last, I want to say 8 to 10 years, there's been a shift, right? A shift in South Fulton where we have collectively as a school board and collectively as a community, we have tried to introduce things in the elementary school that are going to help students as they matriculate to our middle and our high schools. We've recently done a huge reading initiative where we have taken federal funds to make sure that all of our teachers are trained in evidence-based practices on how to teach reading. And people who are watching this will say, why is that important? It's important because if you look around the country, everybody's talking about literacy rates, how kids read, how kids write. And it starts with not only them reading at home, but how they're taught that. Back in the day, I remember my mother teaching me how to read by sounding out words. There was a time in education where that didn't happen as much. And so we have heavily invested in teaching children evidence-based practices on how to read, sounding out words, reading, writing, spelling tests, those things that are critical, but also the other side of moving some of our classes, CTAE classes or programs to the elementary school level. We have whole elementary schools that are agriculture based. We have elementary schools that are STEM based. We have elementary schools that are IB based. And we're doing that so that as they're younger, they're getting immersed into that. Me and Ms. Dove were just at Oakley Elementary School, and they have some baby chickens, and they have, they're selling eggs, and they have honey, and they have all this stuff Or if I go to a school and the kids are building robotics and doing things, this is because we know when they get into higher grades, they need it. So you have to expose them. So I say that overall for elementary schools. Ms. Dove, do you want to add anything, any specifics? I know we can go into specifics, but I don't want to hog the conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things, so we tag team very well. One of the things, in addition to science of reading, that's the formal name that you'll hear in the community and around the nation. But Fulton County Schools spent almost $54 million. That is how much we believe in the science of reading. And in our areas, you might wonder, how are our children progressing with reading and writing? And one of the things that Dr. Looney brought to our district first was the science of reading, which means that our students, when they are in elementary school level and in middle school, they have the basic fundamental skill sets to read, and not only read, but comprehend and write, like Ms. Warren mentioned. And that's really important. So when we start looking at ESSER funds and CARES Act, and we want to start talking about how it directly impacts students, that is one of the ways we've done that. We also have implemented our, I won't mention the science thing, you know, I like the science part, but we also have implemented social emotional learning at an elementary level as well. How to be a good friend, how to be kind, how to walk correctly, how to ask questions, because some communities and some students don't have that. So our schools are also becoming that basic fundamental block for our students. So being able to provide those additional services to our students is also critical. So we're looking at the reading, we're looking at the social emotional side, as well as behavior. We implement positive behavioral intervention systems, and that is teaching our students with a reward system. They do really well, they get coins. We have libraries inside of our school. They drop a coin in to get a book. So we're also encouraging reading. We also have STEAM buses and learning mobility buses that go around into communities as well. So we're using all of our resources to make sure, to add on to what Ms. Warren said, that we are fundamentally making sure that our students are reading. And by the time they graduate, that they read well and they comprehend well.
So with all those processes you have talked about for elementary schools, at the end of the day, when a child is transferring from elementary to middle school, what are 2 or 3 things that you want them to have, you want to be achieved during that transition based on all the things you were talking about?
I wanted to say one thing. Look, I see. So one of the things that I think is really important, of course, we want them to have content, right? We want them to be strong readers, strong writers, but I would even say equally as important is to be well-balanced kids that can regulate themselves. And that shows up in different ways. When you start to get into middle school, hormones are raging. They're at that age where they're around kids they've never been around. And so we understand as a district that there are some skills that we have to reinforce. And I wanted to add to that elementary piece is next year we're standing up a therapeutic school. So one of the things that we've seen after COVID is that kids younger and younger are coming to school and having difficulty doing school. And what I mean by that is that they may be in 2nd grade, and they may, they may come in and they may cry all day, or they may come in and they're just having emotional issues. And so instead of looking at it from a deficit mindset and saying this child shouldn't be here, or this child doesn't want to learn, we're standing up a therapeutic school in North Fulton and South Fulton where kids will go for a set amount of time, and they will have therapy, they will have content, they will have all these things. And then they'll come back to the school and integrate. But all of that comes back to, we want them, by the time they leave elementary school, for them to have all of the content. That goes without question. But that emotional piece is critical. Because what you see is that once they get into a larger environment with different kids, we've all seen it. We've all been in middle school before. Sometimes they can display behaviors that aren't becoming. So you want to teach that, and we want to make sure that they're getting as much as that as they're getting other things.
Middle school is really hard, as Ms. Warren mentioned. The transition from elementary to middle, you also have the parental aspect of it. Parents get less engaged with middle school kids. My family and my parents have always said, if you ever want to not work, don't work when your kids are in elementary, and make sure that you're home in middle and high. Be even more engaged there. So because of that as well, because our students want to have more freedoms, right? They're older. I'm not a baby, but we still have to make sure that they are operating in good consciousness amongst their friends, as well as the teachers, in a mindset to be ready to learn. So we're always looking at that. We're also implementing CTAE in middle school as well. So all of our students will have the ability to have a CTA pathway when they graduate, in addition to everything else that they're doing. So they can do construction, they can do, Ms. Warren mentioned science, technology, audio visual, all of those things that will feed into their feeder pattern high school. So if a child is in elementary doing agriculture, they'll be learning at that level, they'll extend their learning in middle, and they further extend it in high school, graduating with a CTAE pathway. And just over Friday, our students were competing. We had some students, I'm so proud of our students. I'm gonna name a female who was the only female competing in the electrical portion of CTAE. It's a competition, it's a skills test. So being able to see that not only are our students learning, but they're able to compete both within the state and nationally is also important. It lets us know as a district that we're doing an excellent job. We're just not giving some programs there and not monitoring them. Our students show up with the ability to perform and place.
Mm-hmm. Well, Madam President, you hit on something there that I was going to ask, and that is, we talked about the children being ready to get into middle school. How are we preparing the parents? There must be a pretty good big transition for them also.
I want to, Ms. Stubb, it's okay if I interject right here? We do this all the time. So yeah, we do this all the time. So she's like, tag you're it. I'm like, tag you're it. So I want to go back to that middle school piece, because a lot of parents enter middle school, and I have a child who just left middle school and a child in middle school, plus my older son who went through middle school, and Ms. Dove has had 4. They go into middle school as if it's going to be elementary school, where people are going to hold your hands and lovey-dovey, and middle school is a shock for parents. It is a shock for parents because, number one, my child is changing classes. Number 2, my child may or may not start dating. Number 3, my child is going through just physical changes. And so some of the things that we as a board, and we recognize is that I think we have to do even more to prepare the parents, because a lot of parents will come and I'm in a lot of mom groups, and they'll say, oh my God, the teacher hasn't called me and my child made a 75. And you have to remind parents, it's not elementary school where there's 30 kids in a class. The teacher may have 6 classes of 30 kids. There's a process to this. And so some of the conversations that I've been having, and I know Ms. Dove has been having this at her community meeting, is what is middle school, what to expect, and some of the issues that middle school principals are seeing. So at the community meeting at Campbell last week, our middle school principal sat down and was like, this is some of the things we see middle school kids come in with. Here are some of the issues. This is what we're seeing. And I want to preface that by saying middle school everywhere. This is not middle school in South Fulton. This is not middle school in North Fulton. This is not middle school in Forsyth. This is middle school everywhere. It's an age group. And so for a lot of our parents, they really have to get used to it's a new way of doing things, and also holding their children accountable, because in elementary school, you'll get tons of flyers and you get all this information. In middle school, they start to give the information to the students. And if you have a student that's anything like any of mine, they may hide things. They may say, I don't have a test. I didn't know about that. And you find out, no, they knew about it. They just didn't study. So I say that to say that there's a lot of work I think we have to do as a community around what is middle school. And like Ms. Dove said, middle school is not the time to disengage. Middle school is the time to check their phone, put parental guards on their phone, who are their friends, volunteer at the school, go on field trips. I have a child at Sandtown, and a group of us, we go on field trips with the kids, and the kids are mortified, but we're all like, no, we need to be in their business. So these are just things that I implore families to do, because middle school is different, and wait till they get to high school, it's really different.
All right. All right. Madam President, you want to add anything? Tag you in?
We do that really well. We're working on our graduation speech next. Part of also in middle school, the only thing I will add is that while parents need to be more cautious around their students, they also need to continue to learn as well, as Ms. Warren said. And so I think as a district, we can continue to push that out, but also push the narrative that middle school everywhere is challenging. So it's a time where our students is going through a lot of changes, but the more we lean in, the better prepared that they feel around us. So having, Wisdom Wednesdays, and Mayor, I know you always support our schools no matter where they are in South Fulton. So we have over 36,000 students that are in South Fulton, right? So that's what we lean into. How are we going to prepare the students as well as the parents and the community? Because those middle school students, now that they're not 12 anymore, right, and they start aging out, there aren't a lot of programs that are maybe at a reduced cost for our students. So being able to provide those for our middle school students and high school students is critically important for our municipalities.
Well, now I'm out of, you all did a good job in middle and elementary school. Now I'm out of that. My parents have been educated. I've been educated. And now I'm taking all of this knowledge and I'm going to this new animal called middle school. All right. Middle school. And well, what's going to be my expectation? What is it we're trying to get them through in middle school to push them to the next level?
I would say resiliency. I would say, as a middle school parent, I'm moving away from, and I say this, I'm moving away from babying them, and I'm letting them have consequences, age appropriate consequences, and I'm supporting them in how they organize themselves. Because ultimately you want a middle school child to leave understanding how to work hard for something, and also how to take a failure and turn it into a positive. And I think that's critically important before they go to high school, because otherwise you have kids in middle school in high school who've never experienced failure, and it makes it worse when they experience it as a high school student. And I wanted to add one more thing to this before I forget. It's critically important that when kids are in middle school, they're involved in activities. It is critically important. It is whether it's in the community, whether it's at school. Many of our middle schools have great band programs. You talk about a recipe for disaster is kids spending from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock at school, coming home, getting on social media until 9, 10 o'clock at night, doing homework in between their breaks, going to bed or staying up all night. Whatever it is, you have to structure their day so they have something positive. So whether it's band, whether it's TSA, whether it's engineering club, you got to give them something outside of school, inside of school, that they can work hard at also.
I agree with you.
Example of that for a parent would be when my children were in middle school, each had to learn this lesson where they were close to failing a class. I didn't do a thing. I knew it was happening. I let them go to the teacher, get extra credit, whatever you need to do, but I didn't intervene, right? I wanted to see how they were going to handle that situation, right? But I was there coaching them along. Did you do this? How are you managing that? Did you, definitely they hide their homework, right? They're hiding their homework. They definitely hide the fact that they have several projects due until the night before. Well, in elementary school, that was doable for a family. But the complex projects that they work on in middle school, that doesn't cut it. You need more time to be able to prepare. And so having them stay up all night, work through that project, be sleepy the next day, still go to band practice, still go to chess club, still go to cheerleading practice, builds resiliency.
Yeah. Well, Ms. Warren, I had a granddaughter who played in Westlake Bank, not Westlake, Seminoles, Creekside. Band. Yeah. I know all. So anyway, yeah. And she started playing the band in middle school. And her sister was already in the band, and she went to practice one day, and they found out she could read music. And she wound up playing in the band. She's been there for 4 years, and now she's transitioning from middle school over to a place that she's familiar with, which is the Seminoles. And so that transition has been great for her because she enjoyed what she was doing and how she was doing. So I'm very, very proud of her to being the youngest member of the band, but she could never travel nowhere. She had all her stuff was in town.
It's also in that middle school phase where in middle school you start to experience for girls a lot of girl drama. You start to experience for boys like aggression. Like it's a middle school thing where they push each other and they have scuffles. And so when you put them in activities like that, it gets that energy out. It gets that, I don't know what to call it. It gets it out of them. If you think about a kid who's going to band practice and they go from 4:00, if they're at Creekside, if they're at Westlake, if they're at Langston, band practice starts at 4 and they're not done until 7. From 7 to 9, they've got to eat, they got to do homework. And guess what? They're tired. They go to bed. There's no scrolling Instagram or TikTok or Facebook all night because they're exhausted. They wake back up. They do it again. Friday night, they have a game. They finish the game at 11 o'clock. They go to sleep. They wake up. They have a performance on Saturday morning. You've structured a child's day. And structure will always, always win in behaviors that kids can get into.
I learned that from my daughter, who's educated in Fulton County, and she's got 2 girls, and they're in band, they're in track and field, and she's always going around doing things, and she's the band mother over at Creekside, and so she has to schedule herself in a way that she can accommodate all this stuff, yet giving them what they need academically to move forward. So I've seen that in person. That's a heck of a job. So, we leave here and we go to high school, and we got greater challenges. And how do we make that transition? And what is going to be the responsibility of the parent now that we're in high school?
In high school, I think the first thing that happens is that the transition from middle to high school, meaning that the families and the kids walk through the high school in 8th grade. They literally walk through that process. They go to the high school. They see what the layout of the high school looks like. And then I will say this, parents need to be on Parent Connect so they can check if their child, what their attendance rate is, how often are they going to their classrooms, as well as monitoring their academic performance from a distance, right? So your kid doesn't have to know, but I would say lean in there. I also would say, in my family, we start monitoring even our Wi-Fi and our cable. We start blocking certain activities from our router. Well, we're technology people, but you could do that from a regular phone, so that after a certain time, that traffic doesn't even go over our network. It's like, and they're saying, the students will say, or my kids will say, Mom, I can't get to YouTube, or I can't get to my PlayStation. And I'm like, oh, really? What time is it? Looks like you should be in bed, right? Even when they're really, really busy, because sometimes they use it as an opportunity to breathe and to just to relax. I do believe that it's not all bad. It just needs to be monitored.
Let me ask you something, because I know that, you're the IT guru around here. You do this every day, but this expound on this parent connect a little bit more, because, sometimes I hear about people don't know what their children are doing in school, and the teacher didn't call me. But expound a little bit more on this parent connect item.
So Fulton County Schools is the best thing ever. Let me tell you, when my students came to Fulton County Schools and they were in elementary, it was the best thing ever. I mean, we've made upgrades to the application. So what it is that a parent will sign up for the ability for each one of their students to receive automatic notifications and email about the status of their student. So you could say, hey, if they miss one class, depending on grade level. So in elementary, it might be just let me know about their grades. In middle, it might be, I want to know about their behavior, their attendance. By high school, I have all of them. I have, if it's below 70, I want to know each grade, or you can do tests. So you can monitor it based off of where your student is. And then also, and I'll let Ms. Warren go on this because she definitely is an advocate of this all the time, but making sure about the content. What should my student be learning in 6th grade, in 7th grade, in 9th grade, right? We have materials for parents, which is not in Parent Connect. It's a different opportunity that will allow our parents to know, well, what really is happening in algebra? So week 1, week 2, week 3, how can I help support our students in high school? And we have that on our website as well as on your students' device as well. Ms. Warren, I know you want to jump right in there as well.
And I think the most important thing for a parent to understand, and this is a shift, right? In high school, they earn credits. They can earn them in middle school, but in high school, they earn credits. And what that means as a parent is that a teacher has the autonomy. They have a curriculum to teach, and the teacher is responsible for making sure the teacher and the student are responsible for the student getting that information. But it is not a place where, and not to say a parent would ever do this, but my child needs to make this grade. It is what the direct work of what a child does or does not do is a reflection in their grade. And I think that is critical for sometimes for parents, because you may come from middle school or elementary where, yes, grades count, but it's not credits. And when you have to accumulate credits to go to the next grade. And for a lot of parents, they don't understand that, or they understand it too late. So a child may fail 2 classes, and the parent may elect to say, I'm not going to send them to summer school. We have family vacations scheduled. The child comes back the second year and they're still a 9th grader. So for a lot of parents, that is a shift in like, oh, wow, these grades are going to be seen by people other than us. They're going to be seen by colleges, by programs. They're going to be seen by people, and kids are going to, they have to earn those grades. I'll also add in high school, this is the time where parents have to start, it's not loosening the rope, but it's loosening it strategically, right? Like a kid can get to class between their classes in 5 minutes. Doesn't matter if they're at Banneker, doesn't matter if they're at Tri-Cities, at Westlake, at Langston, at Creekside, at Global, they can get to their class. But it is that discipline of, I'm not going to speak to 20 of my friends, I'm going to speak to one and get to class so that I get there. And that's something that's critical, because parents will say, my child got a tardy, they shouldn't have gotten a tardy. Listen, you have to be on time for work. So those are some of the life lessons that are being taught at our high schools. If you use a school like any of our schools, there's high expectations. You may be a student athlete and the principal may say, I hold you to even a higher standard. You might be somebody that's into academics, into band. I hold you to a higher standard. So it's really like juggling all of the content, the social life, and the parents releasing some of that parental control in a monitored way so that kids can fail a little bit and then you can bring them back, teach them a lesson, or they may be successful, but showing them how life is going to be.
Well, the reality is in some cases that, hey, I don't have a computer. I'm not technology savvy. How do we get the word out to that segment?
Well, the district provides devices to every student. We also provide hotspots, internet connections for families who may not have internet access in their house. So we remove that barrier. The barrier that we find sometimes is that they've lost the device. The device somehow is being used by someone else in the family. So our community is faced with that, and all of our students have that, right? They drop the device and things of that nature. So if they don't have a device, it's not because they don't have one. Something happened to it. It either was lost or stolen or broken, and it's being replaced and fixed.
Yeah, and that's important to say, because I've gotten calls from people who are like, kids don't have devices. 90% of the time when a child doesn't have a device, it's because they've lost it, right? And we have to be stewards of taxpayers' money. So last spring, we took up all devices from all kids. We took them up, we refurbished them, they got new ones across the district, because kids had their computers since COVID. So we knew that we needed to get in and fix some things. And Ms. Dove can say it more eloquently than me, because there was all kinds of technical stuff. When they came back in the fall, everybody got a new device or refurbished device. So a kid might say, I've lost my computer. Those computers aren't cheap. And ultimately, we are stewards of taxpayers' money. So we don't give a kid 5 computers. So sometimes those kids, I've seen it, especially in middle school. My own middle school child lost his computer, left it on the table at the cafeteria, and it was gone for 3 months, right? We got it back, but in between that time, he had to get copies of his work. It didn't kill him, but it taught him a lesson. And like, these computers are valuable. They are money. Taxpayers have paid for them. So you have to keep up with it. So I think that's something that parents need to know. Like, we can't give a child 5 computers, or, they lose them, somebody's taking it. We can't do that. For some of our scholars, and sometimes it's a parent's wish, right? I don't want any of my child's stuff on the computer. I want them to have it pen and paper. But we have to be stewards of taxpayers' money. And so for kids who don't have devices, that's usually what has happened, is that something's been lost. And we just have to keep a tight rein on that.
That's great. I'm in high school, and the ultimate goal is to graduate. All right. How do I get my kid to this, from 9th grade to the graduation stage?
As Ms. Warren said, you have to stay engaged on the credits that your student is taking. It takes, I don't even remember the exact number now, but it's more than 20 credits to graduate from high school. And each one, and that's a Georgia Department of Education requirement. And then also some of our students have more credits than needed because they're going into a higher academic program post high school. So they may be going to Yale, or they're trying to get into Georgia, or they're trying to get into pre-med. And so they may have a need to have additional credits, such as advanced placement. Parents need to pay attention to their children's grades so that they qualify for Hope scholarships if they stay within the state, as well as being able to compete nationally by taking advanced placement courses. Fulton County Schools is one of the only districts who pay for our students to take the exam. So a student could take advanced placement. We pay for the exam, but what that means is that when the student gets a grade of 3 or more, up to 5, they can get a 3, 4, or 5, they will earn college credits, right? And so that reduces the number of classes that they have to take in college. So it also helps them in CTAE, or if they wanted to leave high school and just go into a career.
And to add to that, is getting to know your counselors at your school. I have a 9th grader, and I just met with the counselors her counselor at her school to find out but to make sure about her pathway, to make sure that, she's on the right path. And so as parents, those are some of the things that you have to monitor. Let's say, you know, some of my friends work in the medical field, they work 12-hour days. They've had to be very unconventional with their time to make sure they can do that for their child. Luckily, we're in a day and age where everything is digital, and I don't have to go to the school. I can hop on a Teams call and do the same thing that I would do when I was in person. But that is critical, because what we find is that sometimes students are in school and the counselor has told them to do certain things or given them some advice, and they may not take it as something that they need to do right now, and then it's too late. So connecting with that counselor, connecting with some of our staff that helps them as they navigate high school is critical. And while the ultimate goal is graduation, there are different paths there, right? You might be a student who goes to the College and Career Center. You might say, hey, I want to do 2 pathways. I want to do this. I want to get a certification. That's great. There are other students who say, you know what, I want to go directly into the workforce. We just had a job fair at Aerotropolis last week. You might have a student who says, no, I'm going to college. So all of these things, we have things in place. So getting parents every Sunday, all of our principals send these newsletters out. There are things on college fairs, scholarships, programs, finding those, reading those. And if you don't know, asking another parent, because you can't do it all, but just knowing that it's available so that you can get that help.
Well, we have a couple of questions for you that Dolores has. So go ahead, Dolores.
Okay, the first question: who updates the various attendance, behavior, grade, etc. for the parents in school? If it is the teacher, when does the teacher have time? Is there a teacher's aide involved?
So I think that depends on the grade. If you're in the lower grades, they do have paraprofessionals or special classes. But ultimately, and this is something that I think for parents is good to know, your teachers are responsible for updating the grades because they are the professionals in front of our students. So when you come into a class and a child is, let's say, late, that child is the teacher is going to be the one to document that, and it's going to be an Infinite Campus. They're going to put the grades in, but also knowing that they're human. So when a child takes a test on a Monday, I'm not going to call on a Tuesday and say, where's the grade? Why hasn't it been put in? I'm giving teachers time to do that. But teachers are the professionals. They're paid as professionals. And so that's why we have to stay in communication with them and support them. They give the grades, they input the grades, students do the work, but they also put in attendance. But the school also, for some of those things that are outside, your counselors update the classes you take, and they update your transcript. So there's a whole working system behind the scenes that happens to make sure that when you log into Infinite Campus, that you see a complete picture.
Okay, the other question.
Before we get there,
I'm sorry.
Kim, did you have anything to add to that?
That was perfect.
Okay, all right.
Accurate.
Okay, go ahead.
The other question is, what is the status of bilingual education in Fulton County schools? Will all Fulton County schools have this added to their curriculum?
That's a really great question. So right now, the bilingual program is only in certain areas. And because Fulton County Schools is a charter district, what that means is that we have certain flexibilities. And our Board of Education believes that our SGCs, which are our school governance councils, which are made up of parents, teachers, the principals, and community members, know best what should be in our school and can kind of help guide that towards what those language needs would be. The other thing is you have to have interest. So to have a program and you have 2 students in it just is not fiscally responsible, and it doesn't give the student a pathway from elementary to middle to high school.
So you may have touched on this third question in that answer, but I'll
Before we go,
Miss-
let's see if
I'm sorry.
if Ms. Warren has anything to add.
Would you like to add?
No, I think my colleague did a great job with that. And one thing, because this opened up to our community meeting. In Fulton County Schools, we service the dual immersion through our ESOL population. So English is second language. So when people say, why are dual language programs in certain areas, those are areas where we have a large population of Spanish speaking families. So you look up in Roswell, in South Fulton, you'll be surprised, but Gillette, Campbell, Palmetto, I want to say Renaissance Elementary School. I'm missing some more stuff, but this is something that we offer there, and we're just transitioning that to middle school. So after a class starts in kindergarten, when we started the program in Roswell, I think they're starting next year, and in South Fulton, they already started.
We started Paul D. West.
Paul D. West, yes, Paul D. West.
We started in the Hapeville.
Yeah.
That feed into Paul D. West.
Okay, well, great. Go ahead.
I think you have answered this third question, but I'll put it out there anyway. And then one more just came in. Why not in all schools?
Yeah, I think we believe in local control and enrollment, right? So not every parent wants that. And then in addition to that, right after COVID, our students are in some deficits in certain areas, right? So we need to make sure that they can read and write properly and do math. The state is also changing our math curriculum again. So that is going to put a level of stress on our families because it's a new math, again, that our students have to learn and our teachers have to learn to teach. We have math materials now that are going to be reviewed by the public in a couple of weeks. So you could go to our North Learning, South Learning, some of our centralized buildings to see the hard copies of those books. So it just depends, right, on where you are and what you value. Some schools like arts, so they spend a lot of their extra flexible dollars on things that support arts programs or agriculture or construction based off of the need and the wants of that community.
Yeah. And I would add that instead of looking at it from a deficit mindset of saying every child wants a dual language, some of our schools have said we want agriculture as our focus. We want STEM as our focus. So when we service our ESOL students in dual immersion, it's not because we're trying to exclude other people. And that was a question that parents had about, well, what if I want my child in that program? Those are conversations that we're having, but we know how usually it goes when we try to implement something district-wide and it's not an interest in the community. At those schools, our Hispanic populations are growing. And so figuring out as we're moving into middle school with Paul D. West, and I don't know the middle school up north, it was on the tip of my tongue, but just knowing that this is something that we anticipate growing. So it's not you don't get that because it's we're looking at where we can support the need and then growing from there. And if you remember, it's hard to get teachers right now, right? So when you're a dual immersion teacher, you are not only teaching your content, you're teaching it in Spanish all day. So it's not like they don't just go to one class. They get taught all day in that language or the vast majority of the day. So that's something to think about. That means you would have your teachers having to teach in that language. So that's just something to consider as parents are like, well, I want that for my school. Absolutely, we hear that. But it has to be rolled out in kindergarten for them to have that language and that language ability.
All right, we have another question for you.
2 statements just came up basically related to this same subject. This opens more opportunities and net worth in the real world. And then the other statement was to get a student to graduation, we have to start in pre-K, not high school.
Mm-hmm. And I think we touched on that a little bit, that last statement of, rolling back all the way to elementary where students are doing CTAE, where they're doing IB, where they're doing STEM, because we see that it really does start. And then also that fundamental, that science of reading. That is the basis of anything to graduation, making sure all students are strong readers. So all of that is connected.
Okay. Well, let me get my questions in because I know that, we're not going to be here all day. But listen, one of my concerns is this. Let's talk about honoring students. How do we honor students? I know from the fact that I'm around the schools and I visit the schools that we have some of the greatest students in the world. I'm not even talking about the two girls from Westlake, and people look at that like it's something special, but they've been doing that for years. How do we get the word out about the students who are excelling in that arena, just like we have a parade for Langston Hughes? All right, maybe I'm not suggesting we do a parade for them, but for the same interest, why don't we get that out?
I think it's Ms. Steph, you want to go first?
You can start because
Okay.
we'll probably touch on two different things.
Okay. I think it's twofold. I think there are great things happening. The young ladies at Westlake with 1.3 million and 1.1 million, 1.6 million, doing great things, going to great colleges. But there are also students, when you look at Langston Hughes last year, there were two young men with over $1 million in scholarship offers.
Sure.
One is playing at Colorado State with Dion, and the other one I think went to TSU. We have students who are going to the Naval Academy at Creekside. We have kids at Banneker that are going to Brandeis University. We have Tri-Cities where they're going and performing. The good things are happening, and quite frankly, I think that sometimes the community just doesn't know, and they look at these anomalies as, oh wow, that school is only doing great things. And so one of the things I know me and Ms. Dove have tried to do at our community meetings is, number one, honor students, right? So, whether it's honor roll, whether it's student of the month, whether it's, the ladies from Renaissance Middle School who just wrote legislation, just different things that kids are doing in the schools, but also having those conversations and making sure that we are recognizing that. I think one of the fault, and as an adult, we can take this responsibility. It's easy to talk about the things that we see, but it's hard for people to say, what's happening good at Bear Creek Middle School? What's happening good at Campbell? What's happening good at Banneker?
Right.
And so we have to hold ourselves to that, because one of the things, and I had a student panel, I usually try to have a panel at all my meetings, and one of the students at Westlake, I had all of my high school students. So there were students from Creekside, Langston, Westlake, and the students unanimously said this, and they said this last year too: the kids are the same, the adults are different. The kids are doing like and they said this, they said many times adults focus on what's happening negatively to us.
Right.
They will talk about what has happened 20 times negatively, but when we do something good, they don't acknowledge it. And these were high school students telling us this. And what that tells me is that we don't spend enough time on the kids who are doing well. We spend 2% talking about the kids who don't, opposed to the 98% of kids who do.
Well,
I would also say that I know one of the things that we do as well is that from the board table, we always highlight the positive things that are happening throughout our school and throughout our district. So every month, two times a month, you can go listen to Board Matters on Fulton County Schools from our board, and you will see and the highlights of what students and our teachers are doing well. And I agree with Ms. Warren. When our students talk to us, and there was the incident that happened at Banneker, unfortunately, we had a lot of parents and a lot of community that leaned in, and now we haven't seen them, right? So there wasn't any press around Banneker winning a $10,000 band grant. That band started off very, very small. It is growing, and now they're implementing it in middle school to bring those middle school students up to Banneker as well. So when you start to look at that, why aren't we highlighting that as a community? We're trying to do that, but we know that communication in any level, education, private, political sectors, everyone says we need to communicate more. But communication is a two-way street. We have a lot going on in every area of our lives. So we need to be asking people, I would say as an adult, why don't you ask a kid what's good happening with you, right? What's good happening with you? If every adult asks the kid that, and when you see kids, acknowledge them. I see you, young man. I see you, young lady. That is power for them to know that people care about what they're doing. I really appreciate you walking straight. You wanted this side of the classroom, or I saw you help your friend with a book, or give them you know extra food because they left their food at home, or whatever the case may be. Highlighting those small things, and each one of us as adults can do that. At Langston Hughes, we have not reported a lot about, they have the highest graduation rates of their AA degrees. So they're graduating with a high school diploma and an AA degree. Where do we hear that, right?
Well, and you're right. I remember when I was mayor, I acknowledged 68 of them at graduation, if you remember that.
The medals.
Yeah,
Yes.
the medals.
Yes.
And those are the kinds of things. And let me add to this. You know, people have to go to the schools, and I'm going to talk a little bit about customer service and the welcoming of person to the school, because it's definitely there. What I find out is that I go to schools and I'm always blown away about some of the things that are happening that I did not know of. One being, I had not ever heard of this thing called esports. And I'm like, what is this? You know, and I didn't, when I got involved with it, I went on to help Stamper up at Banneker, say, let's get whatever I need to do to get it going. And now we're having a conversation with Morris Brown, because Morris Brown has an esports program at the college. And so you have to get out, and you have to go to these schools, and you have to talk with the principals. I mean, Adam Stamper, Harris, you know, my girl down at Creekside, who's phenomenal. I spent 2 hours with her. She's phenomenal. And so when I go to these schools, it's like, these kids are in good hands, man. And the customer service part comes in, because when I go to school, you know, everybody rib me. The janitors rib me because I spend too much time at Westlake and stuff like that. But when you walk in that door, you got to feel welcome. You got to feel that, you know, we want to talk to the principal. You know, he's on the phone, ain't gonna get it. You know, just have a minute, see if he can get with you. I find that at a lot of schools, that the customer service is really, really, really good. So I want to commend you all on that. But I tell anybody, if you go, you'll learn. And sometimes, you know, I give a lot to schools. You guys know that I give a lot. Mm-hmm. But the problem, well, if you go to the school, it'll make you give. You know, it'll actually make you want to give to a program. You're like, hey, here I am. I'm gonna be broke in a minute. But it would actually make you, and people don't understand that the schools can only do so much. But you, with the help of the people outside, you know, we can go even further with our student achievement. So I would suggest anybody just go to the schools, man, and just see. We on short time is 2-1. I'm gonna get 2 things in though.
Can I add one thing? I think this is important. So the other day on Nextdoor, and we all know how Nextdoor can get sometimes. Yeah. You know, it's also calling out things that are blatantly not true.
Oh, absolutely.
It's critical. Because what you'll see on social media, somebody put the comment, there's no STEM schools in South Fulton. It's totally not true. But the place it comes from is just people don't know. So it's easier sometimes to believe an anomaly, or to believe something because it sounds so incredulous. I can't talk today. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, if you go into any school, I don't care what school it is, you're going to find probably 80 to 90% of kids doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Everywhere. It's the 10% that we focus our time on. And everything in our school system starts with leadership. It starts with us as a board, it starts with Dr. Looney, it starts with our zone soups, it starts with our principals. So as our principals are out here on the front lines and our teachers are on the front lines and they're doing this, I just want people to understand that. Like, that's critical. And we will not get it right all the time. But by golly, the vast majority in these schools, they are doing what's right. They are working hard. They are doing what they're supposed to do.
Yes. Let me say something about Dr. Looney too. You know, I was at the program with the chamber up at Atlanta Area Technology, Atlanta Area Tech. I used to call them old school, so we still call it Atlanta Area Tech. And I thought he did one of the most fulfilling speeches that I've seen in terms of where we're going and even why he was wearing green sneakers. But you know, he really did a good job, and I commend him. I think he's a good leader. You know, in leadership, everybody's not gonna like you, but I think he's a pretty good leader. And one thing I can tell you about Doctor is that he'll call you back. And for me, he'll call me back. You know, but he's a pretty good people person, and I really appreciate. I want to make sure that I acknowledge him, you know, for the fine job that he does outside the fine job that you two guys do all the time. You know, with your tag teaming and your knowledge. I mean, you blow some people away with knowledge. I mean, which would bring me to my next question. A lot of times, as you speak to people, a lot of times you speak in acronyms. And you know, nobody wants to be deemed as stupid. How do we bring people up to snuff on when you're speaking in acronyms? They get intimidated, and they really get nothing out of what's happening. You know, school boards and school systems, they're full of acronyms now. So how do you all handle that?
That's definitely a challenge of ours. I know when we're at the board table, we will ask the people presenting, like we were talking about, for example, what tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 instruction was. And I said, please break that down. A regular parent doesn't know what tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 instruction looks like. Right. And we were looking at a tool that we're using and saying that it is a really good tool for screening, and that's it, right? And so we needed other supports in order to use that tool. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I know personally, I try not to use acronyms because I'm in IT and computer technology, and I know it upsets other people when I use those terminology, right? Yeah. And you can tell by a person's facial expression if you're looking, or if it gets really quiet in a room and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I just used the acronym. So one of the things we do on our website is explain some of those acronyms. So if you go to our website and type in tier 1, it'll come up to all of the things tier 1, and it will explain what tier 1 does. We have our board document that is there, and we also break down those acronyms as well. But when you start talking to our zone soups and our superintendent, that is their day-to-day work, guys, you know? So you might have to just ask, you know, look, I know you're really smart. This is exactly your area, and that's where we need you to be. But could you please explain what does IB mean? Like, for example, we mentioned IB, I mentioned AP, but I said that it was advanced placement. I think I need to go a little bit further to explain what it was and what is IB, which is International Baccalaureate, which is an international high school diploma that you could go to any country after you have received that diploma and it be recognized throughout the world. So a student could go to Cambridge in England. A student could go to school in Ireland, could go to a school in Egypt, could go to a school in Lithuania. They could go anywhere.
And you know, we're all learners. So you have to approach this as a learner. When Ms. Dove is talking about technology, I don't know what she's talking about. So I'll be like, what do you mean? Like, what does that mean? And I ask. So just as we ask kids to come in school with a learner stance and to ask questions and to be inquisitive, we have to enter that as adults. We won't know everything. And so just asking, I'm fine for people to raise their hand and say, hey, what do you mean by that? That's not going to bother me. Anytime you're in a situation, you're in a school, you're like, I don't understand that. Ask. We have to give people grace. And to know that we're all learners in something, and we want schools to be welcoming, right? Some of our terms are very technical, sometimes for legal reasons, sometimes just to try to get what we're trying to say out. But as a parent who's watching this and saying, I don't understand this, ask. We're all learners.
Well, I tell you, my son is in IT too, Ms. Dove, and whenever I ask him about something, his appropriate answer is always, why did you buy that? You know, so let me get a couple more here before we can get out of here. Let's talk about mental health a little bit. It's always been kind of a issue that people have been concerned with. What are we doing in terms of helping people and families when it pertains to mental health?
You want me to start and stuff? Okay. We just talked about this last night at the board table. There are a lot of people who will say Fulton County does an excellent job. I'll start by saying the number of counselors per schools is really, really good. And this is someone who has worked in a high school who's had 3 counselors for 1,500 kids. Many of our high schools have 7 to 8 counselors. So number one, we have counselors at the school. We have mental health, social workers. We have agencies who come in and who consult with children. They have cases. We also have lots of mentoring groups that are in our schools all throughout. And just talking about that therapeutic school, that is going to be a game changer, because what that does is help kids and anybody who's had someone who's experiencing some mental health issues. It is extremely difficult to get treatment anywhere in the state of Georgia. It just is, like many states. So for us to have a space for elementary kids who we see are exhibiting some signs where they may need extra support is huge. I don't think it's done in other districts, at least not in the districts that I know about. And so these are things that we recognize that we have to do because, quite frankly, we're in a crisis, not just with kids, with adults. If you turn on the news and you look at what's happening, people are snapping, people are resorting to violence when they don't have to. Everybody is on edge. And so as a school system, we have things in place. Could we use more? Absolutely. I wish we could have, for every 20 kids, have a counselor for them. But we also are going to need some other things to happen around just some policies and state legislation and just mental health, period. I mean, there's not enough practitioners for what we need just in the state. So we're in a crisis. And I say we, I mean society, we're in a crisis.
Right.
And some of the other things that we do, we have wellness rooms that we put inside of our schools as well for the teachers to go take a break from here and there, and we make that available. We also have safe centers. We opened up one in Tri-Cities this year. We had one in Banneker, we expanded. We have one in North Springs as well. So making sure, and let me tell you what a safe center is. A safe center is student focused and family focused. So for example, in our high schools, they could go get clothes and groceries, mental health services for themselves as well as their families. We provide them with resources or access to resources that will help their families as well. They can wash their clothes, and we use bags that does not shame them. So you don't know they're in some sort of plastic bag. And things of that nature is something that they can still feel proud about and still come to school. So what you find today is that school is no longer just about the academics. We're providing wraparound services for mental health, food, safety, and security for our students all day long within our 6 to 7 hour work school day.
Good. Real fast, a couple of minutes apiece for you guys. I want to talk about facilities. Talk a little bit about facilities. We're getting close to the end, so make it short.
You are aware who you're speaking to, right?
That's why I said that.
Morning.
You want me to start? Or you want to start, Ms. Steph? Okay. So we just had this conversation, continually had this conversation. We plan for facilities years on out. So right now we are finishing up our 2022 capital plan, which basically means new schools, refresher schools, just making sure our buildings are in top-notch shape. And I'll start by saying I go to a lot of different schools, systems, and Fulton County has some of the best buildings that I've seen, just architecturally, newness of that. And so we're closing out 2022. We just had some meetings around 2027 capital plan. And for a lot of people, that's too far off. It's 2023 right now. Listen, that's not, because every summer, schools go through transformations, whether it's a new roof, whether it's Creekside, who gets a $20 million renovation, whether it's our baseball fields, whatever, we're doing those things. And so as people know, in South Fulton, there has been an explosion of just people moving and things being built. And so there has been this conversation about, how is the school system planning for these new students? Well, we have a whole department that all they do is look at permits being built, being pulled, and being approved. I think last night, Ms. Huff quoted as 40,000 planned units. Am I right, Ms. Huff? 40,000 planned units in South Fulton over the next couple of years. I don't remember the time frame, but 40,000. So one of the things that we do is that we kind of estimate where kids are going to come in at. So if you look at where Langston Hughes was built, when Langston Hughes was built, I remember in the community people saying, why are y'all building on Hall Road? There's nothing at Hall Road. We knew things were going to be there based on the permits that were pulled. Some permits that you pull, they start building immediately. There are other permits, it takes some years to get to where the fruition. So looking at that, we have implored the superintendent for some things for him to do, addressing the growth down here. And so I want people to be reassured. And Ms. Dove has a community meeting tomorrow night. I have a community meeting Monday night, and we'll be talking about that, but it's on our mind. I know we both ride our districts and look at the new subdivisions and check and recheck, but South Fulton is growing at the rate that North Fulton grew in the 2000s, in the early 2000s. And so know that this is going to be a period of change. We just went through a massive redistricting, a period of change, a period of growth. And we are accounting for it. And soon in the next year or so, we'll be starting looking at Plan 2032. That's how far we plan out. So it is a complicated process. The people who do it have been doing it for decades. They know what's coming. They stay abreast of it. And so I always tell my residents, buckle up.
Well, we got another question here. Dolores, go ahead.
I have a question and then an acknowledgement. I'll give you the acknowledgement first, and that's in recognition of School Board Appreciation Week. Thank you to Ms. Dove and to Ms. Warren for your service.
All right, great.
And the last question is, what does No Child Left Behind really mean?
Now, that's a loaded question. That is a federal mandate, right? And then it also comes down to the state, and then it's implemented locally. What the premise of No Child Left Behind is, throughout the United States, there are communities who suffer inequities when we look at educational opportunities. So No Child Left Behind is designed to make sure that every student receives quality instruction, have the tools necessary, such as we just don't give devices to the kids who are doing well, right? You give devices to every student. We also provide hotspots for those who have, don't have internet at home. Or if your child is behind in reading, as Ms. Warren loves to make sure, is about the high dosage, small group training that we give students. So we pull them out, give them that high dosage, and making sure that happens throughout the United States, then filtered. They use words like equity. We have to file federal and state reports on how we're using funding, and they make sure that our state and federal funding does match exactly that. What are you doing for those who are what we call high flyers? They're your A and B students. Those are the students that you don't have to track as much. They are very motivated, they're self-motivated, and they're going to keep doing what they're doing, right? And they also may live in a community that have a lot more learning centers around them.
Yes.
That's just a small tidbit, but I'm sure Ms. Warren would like to add to that.
I'm not going to add no more today.
Yeah, I'm done. Well, I think we've been putting time out. We're already over.
Oh.
Listen, I'm so glad to have you guys. It's been a lot of fun. You've answered a lot of questions, both from me and our audience. I'm glad to have you as friends. And I think that not just me, but other people in the community who pay taxes need to be friends with you and work with you and stand with you. And so before I close today, I want to take my hats off to, I've already acknowledged Dr. Looney, but all of the staff up at the school board. who has to make this thing work each and every day. And here, especially the fine job that you guys do, but the great job that these teachers, they have to do each and every day. And if I had my brothers, I'd give them all a $30,000 raise today, but I'm not that powerful. But thank you for what you do. We acknowledge it's not an easy job. And I would encourage parents to join with the school system, join with the teachers, join with your neighborhood school to make it the best that it could be. I love Banneker, I love Westlake, I love Creekside, I love Langston. I want to put that out there because some people don't think so. Some people don't think so, but I do. And so we're just happy. So at this time, I'm just encouraged by what you said. I hope that people got some out of the show today. But we're the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group, and we speak life into the community. The topics and opinions of this show, hosts, and guests are not WCEG's network. You hear that, y'all? Thank you for your support. And as always, I close the show by telling you this. In all you're getting, please get an understanding. Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Okay.
Thank you. Goodbye.